Welcome back to Legal Link with your host, Scott Newmark with Cohen and Newmark, personal injury attorneys. I have a fabulous guest this evening. I've got Mr. Mark Hurwitz with Crossroads Investigations, and I am really excited to have him here with me.
Thanks,
Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Why don't we jump right in if we could, and why don't you tell our wonderful audience a little bit about your background, please?
Sure. I started in the federal government. I was 3 years in the White House, and that led to CIA. And I was an intelligence officer for the next several years in the government, both in D.C. and overseas, and that was through 2008.
Very good.
Yeah.
Now, you have a private investigation firm, and
Yes.
I'd like you to expand for our audience a little bit. How can a private investigator help in legal matters? Go through that process.
There are so many ways that you can use an investigator in legal matters. One is you need to find people. You need to find witnesses. Sometimes you need to have them interviewed first. Sometimes you have a judgment and you need to find the money, or you want to sue someone and you want to find out, is it worth it to sue someone? So you want to do an asset search first. There may be surveillance that you may need to either follow someone for a personal injury case, for workman's compensation, for an employment matter. There are so many ways. Every type of lawyer needs an investigator sooner or later.
Now, in addition to legal matters, I know that you assist with business matters and business investigations. I'd like you to share with our audience a little bit about that process as well.
That's true, and that's one of the unique things about our agencies. We're not just a traditional investigation agency. We also have this research arm comprised of former CIA analysts. And they help businesses with mergers or acquisitions, or someone who's about to make a major investment. They're going to look into everything about that company. We love to dig deep, uncover every rock, looking at the reputation, criminal of key officers, social media, what do the civil filings say, if there's a public company, what do the SEC documents say, and we'll put together a very large dossier. It's a very similar product to what you could get from what we call Beltway Bandit, KPMG, SAIC, or Kroll, same caliber of analysts that are doing that work, and we do that for all sorts of reasons. And I'll give you an example of one of my favorite stories about business due diligence.
Yes, please.
Is we had to look into an investor overseas, in China actually, and he had provided our client with proof of funds for a very large amount of money. And we had to use someone in China to go to the bank to get authenticity of that document. Turns out it was a fake document. And how do you know unless you have someone on the ground? And that's what we do. It's the same thing I say is if you're in Hong Kong or if you're in Moscow, you don't know to look at sunbiz.org. You need someone on the ground that knows where to look for those records. So that's what we do. We have a network. Every country overseas we can do work in, as well as domestic work, of course.
You know, I want to go back to the beginning a little bit. Tell the audience how you got into private investigation,
Sure.
though. I mean, I'm sure that must be fascinating in itself.
Well, you know, when I was in CIA, as I mentioned, for many years, and in other parts of the federal government. And when I left the government, I started working for my former bosses. These were guys who were chiefs of stations overseas for the intelligence community. They had retired and they had started doing due diligence work for Fortune 500 companies. And they brought me in to help them with that, and I learned the tools of the trade, some of the special sources, the network available to people that are trusted in that community. And from there, attorneys started asking me for information, and I didn't really think of myself as a private investigator for the first few years, but over time, that grew into a full-fledged private investigation agency, got all the licenses. It's a heavily licensed industry.
Tell us about that.
Sure. In Florida, there are a few licenses you need. One is you need an agency license, which we call an A license, and then every private investigator needs a C license. And just like real estate, you have to hang your C license to an A licensed agency. One of the great things about the industry is that it awards people that have achieved certain levels, and that's what I have is a board accredited investigator designation. We call it BAI, and that's also something new. That's nationwide, actually.
Share with us, Mark, if you could, some of the other things private investigators can do. You told us legal, business. I'm sure there are even other things.
Sure. Sometimes we need to look for a license plate. We need to trace that. We need to trace a phone number. We need to do really a full background reports, which is one of our main items that we love to provide our clients. And you can use this for all sorts of reasons, but it includes criminal, liens, bankruptcies, judgments, foreclosures, hard assets, properties, business affiliations, and you can use that for if you want to maybe date someone, or you're dating someone and you want to try to
go into that a little bit.
You want to authenticate what they're saying. Sometimes you just want to know not only have they been arrested before or have they declared bankruptcy, but are what they're telling you really the truth? Have they lived where they said they've lived? Or is that car that they have, does that really belong to them? Things of that nature. And we also do, by the way, employment and tenant screening, which is a totally separate way of doing background reports. It's also regulated by the federal government. We're compliant with Fair Credit Reporting Act. And that's and you may want to do that for not only for employees or tenants, but for babysitters.
Exactly. Good point. Let me ask you this. With all the information available on the World Wide Web and the Internet, everybody has a phone, everyone has a computer.
Yes.
Explain to our audience, why do they need a private investigator? Can't they get these things themselves?
I love that question, and I get asked that often by my clients as well. Yes, there are a lot of low-cost sources of information available to the general public. And sometimes if you just need something very basic, I encourage people, try that route first. So, Google the phone number first before you pay an investigator to trace the phone number. I encourage that. However, like all else in life, you get what you pay for. And most of the information online is not fresh, it's not updated, it doesn't have the details that one may need. And that's when I have someone who comes to me and says, I just paid $39.99 for this report online. I tell them, give me the report, we will run our own report, and I'll even take that $39 off so you don't feel like you've wasted money. And you can compare the difference, and they are always blown away, and that's how we get our loyalty.
Wonderful. That's great. Speaking of cost, actually, our ladies and gentlemen are sitting out there saying, all right, Mark, you're right, I want to get a private investigator. Go through the investigation costs. Give them some idea about this.
Yeah, well, some things that we do are no hit, no fee. And that's one way we have loyalty of our client base. For example, our bank searches. If we don't find any money, we're not going to charge you. Why should we charge you if we're not able to help you? There are other people out there that will charge a flat fee for bank searches, and then they say, well, we found nothing. And you feel like, well, what just happened there? What do they really do?
Exactly.
Another thing may be to a locate report. We find people. That may be a flat fee of $200, but if you give us the information, the addresses you've tried, we can't add to that. We're not going to add to the cost. We'll waive that fee. Of course, for field work, that's an hourly rate of $125 plus mileage. And other reports are flat fees. Our bank searches sometimes, depends how you do a bank search, but it can be how much we find, depends on how much is the fee to try to keep it fair.
So a basic background investigation would cost how much?
That report of properties and criminal liens, bankruptcies, judgments, foreclosures, all of that, that's a $400 report. And it is worth its weight in gold, let me tell you. It can be, even on me, there's not much to my background really, and even my report is 80 pages.
Ooh, wow, that's interesting. Let me ask you this, Mark, also. The audience is sitting out there. How should someone select a private investigator? What should they be looking for? What goes into that, and why are you the best?
Yeah, thanks. Well, they certainly want to ask around town. What's the reputation? Maybe ask your attorney. For example, our agency, Crossroads Investigations, we're ranked #1 by the Daily Business Review. We're the top investigation agency in South Florida. You want to see, are they recognized by their peers? Again, I'm a board accredited investigator. You want to check online, check the reputation, check the reviews on Yelp, on Google, for the general public. How do they perceive that investigator?
That's what our audience needs to know. Let me ask you this. This is really fascinating. We're only hitting the tip of the iceberg. Share with our audience, if you could, because I know they're going to want to contact you. How do they get in contact with you? Share that, please.
Sure. Well, our website is xinvestigations.com, the letter X, the word investigations.com. We can be reached at 305-929-3513. You can always email us as well, info@xinvestigations.com. And we are always available. We love hearing from people. We know there are emergencies at nights and on weekends. We try to be helpful wherever we can.
Well, thanks for all the good work you do, and it's a pleasure having you on the show tonight.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.